In 1984, as an 18-year-old, fresh from school and before university, I arrived in India and went straight down to Ajanta, where I had the huge good fortune of bumping into the great scholar of Ajanta, Walter Spink, who was living in the very modest Maharashtra tourism bungalow just below the caves. And one of the kind of transformative nights, or days and nights, of my life was arriving in Ajanta. Those of you who've been there will know the exceptional natural beauty of the site, even before you step into the caves themselves. This gorgeous gorge, still untouched by modern buildings over much of its length, and then to enter into the threshold of these rooms, some of the oldest rooms in the world, unchanged in the case of Cave 9 and 10, the earliest caves, since 150 BCE, containing those early caves, the oldest Buddhist paintings and the oldest Indian paintings of the classical period in the world. Then in the evening to talk to Walter Spink and be educated on the enormous, wonderful civilization that created these masterworks. A few years later, I came across Benoy Behl's beautiful Thames and Hudson hardback. And it's difficult to overestimate Benoy's achievement, because what he did was to record those murals before modern pollution and the effects of hundreds of thousands of tourists visiting those caves, often with flashlights and flashes and so on, destroyed the brightness of their colors forever. And with those long exposures and with those, the natural light that he talks about, and patient use of mirrors and the same sort of techniques as the builders of the caves themselves would have used, Benoy has made a major contribution to Indian civilization. No future historian, however talented, will be able to record what he recorded 25 years ago. And his extraordinary work stands as a wonderful record for posterity of what was there in 1990. Since then, he's taken his achievement further and digitally recreated with extraordinary subtlety the missing fragments of these murals. Because as anyone that goes there knows, that while some of the murals are almost intact, many of them are almost completely destroyed, and one has to make out what is left from small fragments and little patches of painting, which then back onto bare rock. Benoy has repainted, in a sense, that bare rock and has recovered for us what was lost, using a mixture of technical brilliance, but also imaginative flair and great scholarship in reconstructing what once was there. I will just briefly open this morning by reading a little bit from the introduction I wrote to this latest edition of Benoy's work, which I highly recommend to you. It's in the bookshop, I presume, certainly in print very much, with Thames and Hudson still, which brings together not only his original photographs, but the digital reconstructions, which are an extraordinary story in themselves. Anyway, here's what I wrote when I first saw those extraordinary reconstructions. In the early summer of 1819, a British hunting party was heading through the thick jungle near Aurangabad when the tiger they were tracking disappeared down into a deep ravine. Leading the party was Captain John Smith, a young cavalry officer from Madras. Beckoning his friends to follow, he tracked the pug marks down a semicircular scarp of deep basalt, and tracked the pug marks down to hopped over a rocky bed of the Wagora River, then made his way slowly up through the bushes, up at the far side of the steep horseshoe amphitheater of cliffs. Halfway up, Smith stopped dead in his tracks. The pug marks led past an opening in the rock face, but the cavity was not a natural cave or a rock-cut grotto. Instead, despite of the long grass, the all-encompassing creepers, pepper vines, and thick, thorny undergrowth, Smith could see that he was looking into the man-made facade cut straight into a rock face. The jagged slope had been painstakingly etched away into a portico. It was clearly a work of great sophistication. Equally clearly, it had been abandoned for centuries. A few minutes later, the party made their way gingerly inside as Smith held aloft a makeshift torch of burning dried grass, and his companions clutched their muskets. A long apsidal hall, 100 feet long by 40 feet wide, led right into the rock. Flanked on either side by 39 octagonal pillars. At the end rose the circular dome of a Buddhist stupa, carved, like everything else, out of the solid rock of the mountain. Through the gloom, the officers could see the shadowy outlines of ancient murals. On the pillars were figures of orange and white-robed monks with golden halos, standing on blue lotuses, while on the rock walls were painted elaborate crowd scenes, as if a long scroll had been rolled out along the apse of the wall. In the light of the flickering flames, the officers could dimly make out what they later described as figures with curled wigs. Crunching over a human skeleton and other debris dragged into the cave by generations of predators, the party advanced step by step until they reached a pillar at the far end of the hall, next to the stupa. There, Smith got out his hunting knife and inscribed over the body of a bodhisattva the words, "John Smith, 28th Cavalry, 28th of April, 1819. In the decades to come, first other hunting parties, then later groups of archaeologists followed in Smith's footsteps through the jungles of the Western Ghats as word of Ajanta spread, that in this most remote spot lay 31 caves, which collectively amounted to one of the great wonders of the ancient world. Caves 9 and 10 were soon recognized as some of the oldest completely intact man-made rooms in Asia. From paleographic evidence, scholars believe that they were cut out between 150 and 70 BC, so completed 2 generations before Augustus started to rebuild Rome. On the walls lining this space were found some of the most beautiful and ancient paintings in all Buddhist art. Most of these were dated to the 5th century AD, an otherwise lost golden age of Indian painting. Along with the frescoes of Pompeii, the delicate murals of Livia's garden house outside Rome, Ajanta's walls represented perhaps the most comprehensive depiction of civilized courtly life to survive from classical antiquity anywhere in the world. These extraordinary images will be very familiar to you. Most beautiful of all are the 2 astonishing images of the compassionate Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara and Vajrapani. These beings of otherworldly beauty, elegance, and compassion are shown with their eyes half closed, inward looking, weightlessly swaying on the threshold of enlightenment, caught in what the great historian of Indian art, Stella Cramrish, described wonderfully as a gale of stillness. Even today, the colors of these murals glow with a brilliant intensity: lizard green, topaz yellow, lotus blue. No one has ever captured these colors better and recorded the wonders of Ajanta more faithfully than Benoy Behl. Benoy is widely recognized as the supreme photographer of these unphotographable wonders, And this book unquestionably represents the finest collection of photographs of Ajanta ever taken. Technically, they represent a triumph over the impossibly difficult conditions of working in the darkness of the caves, with severe restrictions imposed on the lighting. This new edition of his Thames and Hudson book also contains these wonderful digital reconstructions that he will be showing you shortly, that tenderly bring back from oblivion, with great subtlety and art, the damaged and deteriorated images which have disappeared. But Behl's work is far more than a mere technical achievement. Every frame is a record of his love for this world, and he understands it, and his eye catches the tiniest detail, a yakshi tree spirit hanging from a branch, a mandolin in the hands of a courtly attendant, even a tiny line of ants mounting a single curving banana frond. Nowhere does the world of early Buddhism come more dramatically to life than in Ajanta, its earliest expression in paint. The murals take us to an ancient world so astonishingly lifelike that even today, even in reproduction, images of the Buddha's life can make you gasp as you find yourself staring eyeball to eyeball with a silently watching monk who may have attended one of the early councils which gave shape to the Buddha's face, or a warrior who could have fought one of the battles over his relics. So lifelike, so realistic are the faces of the people depicted, so direct are their expressions, that you feel these have to be portraits of real individuals, glowing still with the flame of eternal life. There is something deeply hypnotic about the soundless stare of these silent, often uncertain early Buddhist faces. Their fleeting expressions are frozen, startled, as if suddenly surprised by, to take one image from an early painting of Kane 10, the king of Varanasi's decision to loose his arrow, or the nobility of a great elephant bursting through the trees. The viewer peers at these figures, trying to catch some hint of the upheavals these figures witnessed and the strange sights they sought in ancient India. But the smooth, clean, humane Indian faces, so full of silent melancholy, stare us down. Perhaps the most disconcerting thing about the people in these murals is that they appear so astonishingly familiar. 2,000 years after they were painted, these faces convey with penetrating immediacy the character of the different sitters, the alert guard, such as this figure here, the king caught in the excitement of the hunt, the obedient son fetching water. Indeed, so contemporary are the features, so immediately recognizable are the emotions that play on their lips, that you have to keep reminding yourselves that these are sitters not from our world, that they depict a court and a jungle world of hunters and hunted and Buddhist monks and devotees that vanished from these hills more than 2,000 years ago. But the biggest surprise is that the world portrayed in the murals is only occasionally one of lonely self-sacrifice or stark ascetic renunciation. A shaven-headed, orange-robed monk lost in meditation, a hermit seeking salvation, or a group of wizened devotees straining to hear the words of their teacher. This is what we might expect in a Buddhist mural. What we do not expect are scenes showing a prosperous and multicultural courtly environment, full of riches and pleasures and beauty, and filled with people wearing jewels and enjoying music, shady bowers, and the many pleasures of youth. Let's try and find some of these wonderful court scenes. Look at these faces of the guards. These, incidentally, these ones I'm highlighting here, were images that were not available for Benoy to shoot when he first went in 1990, because they had been covered by the Nizam of Hyderabad's conservators in the earliest cycle of caves 9 and 10 with shellac, which is a kind of varnish, which immediately attracted bat shit and blacked out for the next 100 years. And in 2020, a wonderful ASI conservator called Manager Singh from these parts, Rajput from Rajasthan, went to work very carefully on these earliest Buddhist paintings in the world and uncovered these faces, which are 600 years or even 700 years earlier than the main caves, the famous Padmapani I just showed you. And this extraordinary new set of images, because they had only been seen in outline from the very earliest sketches made by the Nizam's first conservators, reappeared back into the world in about 2010, 2015. And what is fascinating is that they are as long before Ajanta as, say, the Lodi Gardens are before the buildings of Gurgaon. There's 700 years separating them. And they are in a completely different style, a far more Hellenistic style, that has a lot in common with the early Gandharan and Hellenistic art. In this slide, I've compared the guard of Cave 10 to a textile found in Xinjiang. But look at the three-quarters profile that they both have here. This style is very different from the later, more sophisticated style of the main caves, of particularly Cave 1. And it represents a much earlier phase in Indian art. And so, again, this wonderful feeling that you get with Benoy's photographs, but particularly in this one cave, Cave 10, that things can be retrieved from oblivion and whole new wonders can be found in these caves. This is the king of Varanasi who's just shot an arrow and killed a boy in the Saimantaka Jataka story. And here is the king looking on, wondering what he's done. And here is his guards looking on in horror as this boy bleeds out to death. And the faces on all of them have this sort of timeless melancholy. I think they're some of the greatest, extraordinary images. But Benoy is going to be talking, after I am finished, about these wonderful crowd scenes where you get these figures. This is a Parthian sitting in the middle with a Parthian hat. And this is what I love about the caves, is it's not monastic renunciation, or it isn't just monastic renunciation. This shows the amazing sophistication of these gorgeous early courts with these extraordinary images. Look at the sensuousness of these figures watching one of the sermons of the Buddha. Indeed, at Ajanta, the Buddha tends to be shown less in his monastic milieu and more often in the princely environment in which he grew up. Here, among handsome princes and bare-chested nobles, princesses with tiaras of jasmine and Ratkirani, queen of the night, languish lovelorn on swings and couches, while swan-necked and heavy-breasted, narrow-waisted dancing girls of extraordinary sensuousness, dressed only in jewels and girdles, perform beside lotus ponds, swaying to unheard music, ringing their silent gungru anklets. These court women wear nothing but spinels and chrysoberyl cat's eyes. They hold nothing but empurpled ebony fly whisks of burnished gold. Gleaming rubies, the color of peacock's blood, flash against their dark skin. Yet the artists of Ajanta clearly saw nothing odd in this juxtaposition of monks and dancing girls. There are no panels or boundaries in the Ajanta paintings beyond the physical borders of the caves. And the artists move from the world of the ascetics cave to the pleasure gardens of the royal court and back again without recognizing any essential separation between the two. There are no clear boundaries either between these palaces and the jungle beyond, as royal processions, shaded with elegant white parasols and princely hunting parties, venture out past the phantasmagoria of rocks into thickets full of monkeys and herds of wild elephants. I'm trying to find the picture of the elephants. Where are they? There, look at, it's very faded, but do you see the elephants on the top right of this image? Painted with extraordinary sympathy. You feel strongly here the Buddhist intuition that the natural and animal world are closely related to humankind through cycles of reincarnation. A neglected elephant queen in Cave 10 is reborn as the queen of Varanasi, yet remains essentially the same soul. As a result, the animals in Ajanta are depicted with the very same love and individuality as the humans. There is also, as I just said, this extraordinary recognizable international cast. Where are those lovely Scythian figures? Sorry, my slides are a bit of a muddle, but at least you're getting to see them multiple times. Here's the Scythians. And the crowds contain many foreign Buddhists listening to the Buddha, including Parthians, Scythians, Ethiopians, possibly even Greeks, even with distinct hairstyles, clothes, and skin colors. Even the pigments used in these paintings indicate an international connection. The gorgeous blue, for example, was obtained from lapis lazuli, imported from Badakhshan, now in Afghanistan. Ajanta was evidently built in the center of a deeply globalized world. The message of the Buddha was no longer restricted to any one caste or class or tribe. It was universal and would soon be heard to the ends of the earth. Ajanta contains the very earliest and some of the most beautiful images of the Buddha's message ever painted. As the original murals continue to deteriorate, Benoy's remarkable photographs, painstakingly gathered and digitally restored over 30 years of hard labor, are probably the best and truest records of these fabulous treasures that will ever be created. Thank you very much.
I think we'll have to extend the session a little bit because we're going to need a little time. This became longer than expected. Thank you. Thank you very much, Willie, for your, first of all, for your enthusiasm which you bring to Indian art and history. Amazing, the amount of enthusiasm and energy which you bring to it. And also for your many very kind words about my work. It is truly very good of you. Ladies and gentlemen, it was in 1990 that the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India brought to my attention that the Ajanta paintings were the known fountainhead of the Buddhist art of Asia and the classic art also of Asia. And despite that, they had never been clearly seen or clearly photographed. So when he saw my photographs taken in what can be loosely called darkness, he thought that this technique of photography could be used to bring these paintings before the world. So in 1991 and again repeated in 1992, I was able to photograph all these paintings and bring them before the world. Now you'd be happy to know that when this happened, the major museums and universities of the world immediately invited me to come and show them and to talk. So it is the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Smithsonian Institution, the Tokyo National University, and a very long list of such institutions. And I, who had never stepped out of India before that, suddenly found myself showing Ajanta everywhere. Now, art historians and the leading art critics were all gathered to see these paintings. And you would be very happy to know that there was a unanimous response that surely this must be the finest art of humankind. And they explained to me very carefully that they were speaking not only about the technical virtuosity, of which there was considerable. They pointed out that it was only 1,000 years later, in late Renaissance art, that European paintings found some of the qualities which were in Ajanta clearly to be seen more than 1,000 years before that. There are other qualities they pointed out which European art only discovered in the Impressionistic period, in the Expressionistic period, and even qualities which came into modern art, which were already to be found at Ajanta. But ladies and gentlemen, beyond all this technical virtuosity, what made these paintings truly beautiful and so valuable for all of humankind is the vision of life which they contained. A vision of infinite compassion, a vision which sees the same in you and in me, and in all the beings, all the people, all the beings, the flowers, the leaves, the trees of the world are all seen with the same essence. And it is this which imparts a sense of grace, a sense of compassion to every line which is made by the painter. It is this that makes Ajanta such a treasure. The philosophy of aesthetics was developed at a very early stage in India. It is believed in this philosophy that our experience, our response, when we look upon something truly beautiful, is akin to Brahmanand itself, or the bliss of salvation itself. For in that moment, the veils of illusion are lifted, and you are seeing the grace which underlies all that there is. And that is the reason why there was such an enormous amount of art, exquisite art, hundreds of thousands of sculptures, hundreds of thousands of paintings all over the country. And some of that survives and comes before us today. Could we start the PowerPoint, please? And I'll shift my location to where I can also see. Yes, that is that gorge of the Vaghora River where two streams met. One full of the compassionate philosophy of Buddhist beliefs, and the other of this tradition of blossoming great art which was there. And as had been pointed out to me before, the paintings had never been clearly seen before, which is because the caves are dark and all the light which was allowed inside had to run on electricity coming through a dimmer at low voltage and therefore casting only such orangish light upon the paintings. So, despite this orangish look, these paintings were still considered the most important paintings of Asia. It's wonderful to see when I traveled later and traveled across Japan and traveled in Sri Lanka and in so many countries. It was wonderful to see how everywhere all the Buddhists and all the scholars revered these great paintings. Revered is the only word for it. Now, the true colors of this painting were like this when I photographed them in low light. The greens and blues had earlier been lost by this orangish light. And here, as you see in this painting from Cave 1 of around the 5th century, you see this princely figure bearing an offering of lotuses. So the details came out in a way which had not been possible before.
Love his crown. It's just spectacular. Yeah.
Now, it was not only the orangish light, but for instance, here you see the oldest paintings at Ajanta of around the 2nd century BCE. There was so much 20th century graffiti on them that they could not be clearly seen. So I worked very carefully, very, very carefully to remove this graffiti and to make these paintings, to make the paintings reveal themselves before your eyes. And this is what we saw. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It makes this work worthwhile. Now, looking closely here, you see the origins of the great and wonderful idealized art of India. You see, if you look in the, it's a very high quality of art for the second century. Can we go back to the image?
Could we stick to the PowerPoint technical team? Keep it on.
Yes. It's a very high quality of art, unexpected in the second century BCE. See the image, see the figure on the top left of the image. See the glance towards the one nearer the center. This exchange of glances, expressions. If you were to come below, again you see expressions, and you look at the dancing figure, and you see there that inward look, which is the hallmark of the great art of India, that inward look which spread from India to all corners of Asia. So already in the second century BCE, this wonderful tradition of art had found its roots and had found very eloquent and beautiful expression. This is not primitive art of the second century BC. This is highly developed Indian art, which is intimately connected with all the centuries to come. And it's
Are these
exquisite.
Mara's daughters?
No, it is a dance scene from Cave 10. It is a dance scene from Cave 10. It is of the second century BCE. And yes. And the most wonderful thing about the art of Ajanta is the looks of compassion. A little restored here for you to see better. This is again in Cave 1, and both of them are looking towards King Mahajanak with this infinite caring, this look of compassion in their eyes. It is this caring, it is this compassion which is the hallmark of this art. It is the caring which makes this art what it is. It is the purpose of this art to convey the grace of caring, something which the world could learn a great deal about today. And it is something which when you go to Ajanta and you look upon these, it draws you inside itself. When you come out of Ajanta, you should be a changed person. It is an infinite world of compassion there. And in Cave 1, as Willie had referred to the great Bodhisattvas, this is the Vajrapani, the bearer of the thunderbolt. Now the Vajra is one of the oldest symbols of Indian philosophy and art, the Vajra, the thunderbolt. In fact, the earliest visible Indian deity made in art is Lord Indra in the Buddhist caves of Bhaja of about the 2nd century BCE. And he is, as you know, the bearer of a thunderbolt. And in fact, the latest form of Buddhism, which is very popular today, is also called Vajrayan Buddhism, the vehicle of the thunderbolt. And here, with his glorious crown, he brings before you the majesty of the spirit which is inside you, which is within you. And the other great Bodhisattva, the Padmapani, the bearer of the lotus, brings before you the peace of the spirit which there is to be found inside you. And that is the purpose of this art. Now, over his right shoulder to our left, there is actually a kinnar, a heavenly musician playing a musical instrument. Over his left shoulder to your right, there are monkeys playing, and above that there are geese. Yet, with all this activity around, he looks within. And it is this inward look which you saw beginning in the 2nd century BCE in Cave 10, and which you see here, and which spreads across the whole of Asia in a marvelous tradition. It is this inward look which is the most important thing about Asian art. And on the left wall of Cave 1, the Mahajanak Jatak. The Jatak stories are the stories of Gautama Siddhartha in his previous births. And here you see him as King Mahajanak, who is the figure near the center of the frame, a little to the right of the center, sitting on the ground with his hands before him. And he's looking up at the hermit who is delivering a sermon. You might notice the antelope, who listened with as much rapt attention as any of the human figures. For in this vision, the animals are no different at all from the human beings. They are just the same. As a matter of fact, much of Ajanta is full of Jataka stories of Gautama Siddhartha born as different animals. And seeing the person you worship before you in the form of an animal indeed helps you to recognize the humanity of the animals. If I may say, if the animals are to be what we judge from, then we should look for the animals within us, not the humanity of animals. Because the animals are presented with the highest qualities of character. They exemplify all the things which we should follow. And these antelope are one example of such exquisite animals. Now I take you to a closer view of King Mahajanak. And I show you this because here you have a great king, a powerful king, who had in fact won back the lands earlier lost by his father. But you see the ease with which he sits on the ground with his hands folded in front of him, looking up in adoration at the hermit. A look of adoration which even the damage of so many centuries has not managed to remove. And it is this humility with which we rise. It is this humility which is the message of ancient Indian art. And one of the images in Cave 1 which was found very beautiful by early European visitors was a dark princess. I make her a little easier for you to see. And indeed, the depth of that expression. You might also notice the caring with which the other lady looks towards her. You might notice, I wonder, the red flecks in her eyes. Beautiful. The art of Ajanta does represent a quality of beauty, and it reflects a civilization which was very, very highly developed. Enormous, great revelation to a world of then. And here we see Queen Shivali, the wife of King Mahajanak. And she's in fact hearing the news that her husband is going to go away into the forest as an ascetic. And now if you look at her eyes, they are painted in a very particular way. By the time these paintings were made, the chitra sutra had been penned out of earlier continuing traditions. And the chitra sutra gives thousands of guidelines to the artist on how to paint and how to make landscapes, how to make different animals, how to make different kinds of human beings, and how to make the expressions, different expressions. And as a part of making different expressions, it gives 5 different shapes of eyes which could be made. And her eyes made here are the eyes of a person who is sad or weeping, as indeed she would be, because she is just hearing that her husband is going to go away. Now if you look at her lower garment, you would find that it is woven in the form of ikat, which is practiced till today. If you look at her upper garment, for there is an upper garment, and you see some design on it at her hip, you are reminded that India was very famous for making very, very fine textiles. In the 1st century BCE, Pliny the Elder is complaining in Rome that our coffers are being emptied for buying too many fine textiles from India. A century later, the Roman emperor is saying exactly the same thing. If you were to look at the pearl strings which dangle below her bosom, you would notice a curve in those strings. And it is a curve which persuades your eye of the movement. And it's amazing to see that by the 5th century, such details were being carefully noted and carefully made by these painters. And in fact, they were not only being made, but such details are noted for the painter in the Chitra Sutra. So that is indeed a very high development of art at that time. I'm sorry, I showed you the first one, and I could have shown you the more restored one also. But I show you this to show you how indeed the painters of Ajanta had the entire world within their vision. Now, if you look at the branch of this tree close to this man's head, I will take you to a closer view, and those are ants climbing up that tree. So I'm sorry, Willie, it's a sal tree. And if you go to Ajanta, you don't get to see the ants. But that's not what mattered to the artist. For the artist, they were a part of the world. And he was representing parts of the world. He was representing all the beings of the world. So whether you saw it or not, whether millions of people saw them or not, but the artist was fulfilling his duty in making these ants. And just to give you a little glimpse of beyond, this is of the 6th century, and it is in the Hindu cave at Badami. And you see again that that inward look, that tenderness, which is in fact the prime quality of this art tradition, and you see the continuation of that tradition. So there is in fact a continuous tradition of painting in India from the 2nd century BCE till all the way across the ancient period and medieval period. And here we see this is of the end of the 10th century. When I became known for my photography of Ajanta, I was asked to photograph the previously unphotographed Brihadishvara inner ambulatory 10th century Chola paintings, which I did in 1992, winter of 1992. And this is I make it easier for you to see that painting. So when I showed these paintings to art historians around the world, the response, for instance, of Dr. Milo Beach, who was the director of the Freer and Sackler Art Galleries, the national galleries of Asian art in the USA, was that I have to revise my understanding of the history of Indian painting. And when I asked Milo, why do you say that? Milo said that we knew the paintings of Ajanta, but because there was no paintings known before Ajanta and paintings not known for hundreds of years after Ajanta, we treated them as a flash in the pan. But now that you're showing end 10th century paintings with the same technical excellence that we see at Ajanta, there was obviously a tradition of art, a continuous tradition of art in ancient India. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure to have been invited by Willie with his
Benoy, one question before we've got 1 minute and 15. Have you collected these later images into other volumes? Where can we see your Badami and Tanjore images?
They are slightly represented in my book, The Art of India, in 2 volumes. But there's been no proper publication.
I think we need to talk to Thames of Hudson, don't you? Philip Watson needs to get his skates on and get some more. Very good. We've got time for one question before we got 42 seconds before we have to close. This gentleman is there, straight up. This gentleman here with the grey, that's right.
Hello.
Let's be very quick. We've got 28 seconds now.
You talked about the light problems, looking at the pictures. So my question is, how were they solved in making the pictures and looking at the pictures at that time?
Yes. It is understood that reflectors were used from outside to reflect the light of the sun into the caves, and other reflectors were used inside to diffuse that light in order to make the paintings. And I think you were asking about my work also. I developed a technique over many, many years of painstaking hard work, mainly patience actually, to photograph in conditions of light which you may loosely call darkness. And this was very effective for, among other things, photographing these wonderful paintings of Ajanta.
Ladies and gentlemen, the noise please for Benoy Behl.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand for Willie, whose enthusiasm is taking Indian culture to the world. Willie is doing so much. Thank you so much, Willie.